this meeting to order. So thank you, everybody who's here. So happy to see all of you. And I wish we were together, but it's nice that we have Zoom always to fall back on. So the events, I do want to say that we built this events from last week. The Friday and Saturday events went so well. They were well attended and it was great participation. I want to thank again Miss Annette Wilson and Miss Erica Simon for just the long-term planning, and we'll do some more planning here today, and what we accomplish here I'll make sure to share with Heather, Michelle, and Tom. So I just wanted to let you know that the last minute marketing material with the architects oral history session that came together so late. So I apologize that we got that to everyone at such a late date. We weren't sure if it was really going to happen. So the background was that our provost, Dr. Stitz, was so inspired and so much appreciated the city's opening at Union Station. And so she wanted to have a grand opening on campus that she asked me and Mr. Flynn to organize. And we thought it would be wonderful to have our local Black architects join us. But we were going back and forth between different emails and phone calls. And one of the commissioners from HRC was trying to help connect everyone. And it didn't look like it was going to happen. But finally, in the end, it did. It all came together. But we really didn't have much time to market it. I think it all came together and was finalized literally the Friday before. And then I think Mr. Flynn did the marketing materials as soon as he could. So now that we do have a little bit of time to plan for the 23rd, I really just would love to hear what Miss Erica and our wonderful director, Miss Wanda, have to say about that, and then the thoughts from Miss Wilson for what we could create that would really encourage the community members to come. So I believe Miss Wanda shared something in chat. Let me just see. Oh, no, maybe she sent me a note. Let me see. I don't see either. But I thought I saw something, a comment about the marketing materials that she also has an interest in. So what are your thoughts, Miss Erica, Miss Annette, Dr. Christian? What are your thoughts about how we could effectively market for the 23rd? Okay, Miss Wanda sent me okay, let me check and see.
So I don't know what, I know we sent email blast, and I know I think there was something that was put out through our marketing department. I shared mine through my personal social media. I'm a part of a few Winston-Salem groups, so I shared it there. Honestly, I didn't think about sharing it with some of the larger groups I'm a part of. It was just kind of more community. If you're interested in this, then I don't know how you catch people anymore other than social media, and as far as church, sending it to whoever does a church announcements or something like, it's really difficult to catch so many different sets of people. It's very difficult. The lady I was sitting beside, she said she saw it somewhere So that was kind of, somebody that was just kind of totally off the street.
Mhm.
But I don't know how do you get all of those different sets of people. Other than maybe, I don't know, putting up flyers in
Yeah.
some of the community centers. I don't know.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, go ahead, Miss Annette. I'm sorry.
well, um, that's kind of what I did, was just, share flyers as I participated in different meetings, and I did, mail out some or email some as well. But again, the one that because Heather even made copies for me of the original flyer. But when I was looking at a copy of that flyer, and it did not have the 23rd on there. Now I know that what you sent from about you sent last week, it had the 23rd on there. But again, in looking at it, it just says conversation. So do we know like who's leading the conversation, or are we inviting people just to come and start talking? What's our format for next week, or for that week, for that day?
So I don't have my notes with me from that last planning meeting where we joined Heather and Michelle, but I believe we were talking about maybe having some of the AAHI members lead the conversations. Um, so that would be you, Miss Sheila, and anyone else who would like to lead those conversations. That way AAHI really is able to sort of be the group that is the focus on the 23rd. Well, so we'll be representing all of our partners, but I think it really is an event, especially for us. So
So
one
I think
thing,
we need, go ahead, I'm sorry.
so I mean, it could be that some of us go out and just go to these places. Miss Erica, maybe you and I can go. Um, and I do think we need to get a new marketing material. Maybe Mr. Flynn can do that and design that, like he designed the last thing that everybody shared. So I can talk to him about it. We'll be on spring break next week, so students and staff, I think, will be gone, but we'll still have time. If I reach out to him today or tomorrow, I think he's good about working with that. But I think we need to decide who's going to lead those conversations. Would you feel comfortable, Miss Annette, leading those conversations, at least one of those conversations?
Well, I mean, I guess so, with a little bit more, information or input as to how we want that to flow, let me go back to the flyer. I'm trying to find what he sent, because I wanted to make sure I understood what our objective was. Okay.
And Miss Wanda had sent an email to several of us with an image. So she can't actually engage us right now, but she did ask us if we knew the people who posted. So if you're on that email, you'll see the image she shared. So the person who posted is not someone that I'm familiar with, but I think it's a nice example of how we could use social media to even if we have our own social media accounts, so we might consider something like that. So so that is something I think we can explore. One of the things that I would say is that I could work with any of the AAHI committee members who would like to lead the discussion. I could work with you to think about the specific kinds of questions that we would want to sort of maybe engage between members. So if we have more than one community member leading each conversation, so we can engage each other, but we can also then invite the community members who are there. We haven't really discussed how we would connect. We built this to AAHI. So, I think we have to go back and look at our collection categories in terms of schools and churches and neighborhoods and organizations and civic leadership, businesses, etc. So I think we should consider questions that would focus on at least a few of our collection areas. And that way we could try to then invite people, who I don't think we could really cover everything. So what would be the wish of you, Miss Annette? What do you think we should prioritize? Which of our collection categories that we could then, connect to buildings that were important to or continue to be important to the Black community in town?
Well, if we focus on buildings, I guess what we could do is identify, number one, the buildings or some of the things that are reflected in that in the part that focuses on Winston-Salem, and try to engage some of those people. Or, for instance, one of the displays was about the colored fair, and so possibly we could have a conversation about, do you remember, or talk about that, or talk about some of the things that are in the display. If we're trying to collect just oral histories, I think we just need to have the questions that would guide the conversation, or just say, or reach out to people to come and share their oral history about a certain aspect or whatever. Whether it's what was it like growing up in Winston-Salem, or what was it like before integration, or were you involved, in, I guess, develop some questions that would engage people.
Right. So, absolutely. I think since we built this event, we'll have to be creative in kind of connecting builders and buildings and architects to each of our areas. But if we were dealing with neighborhoods and people grew up, in particular neighborhoods and wanted to talk about the houses in their neighborhoods, I think that's important, because some people.
I think the conversation about one of the things that would be, I think, easy to draw people in to relates back to one of the presentation, and that's on the East Winston Library.
Yeah.
So, do you remember when, kind of thing, or tell us about some of the places you used to visit that still exist or no longer exist, that kind of conversation. Or what did the library mean to you? Those kinds of questions.
I think we also talked about Atkins High, since so many people went to the old Atkins, and that was a very special place for many people. So I think that could be another good conversation. What did you think about your school? What did those building spaces mean to you? So
Right. And you could expand that to basically not just Atkins, since if I missed to talk about the historically Black high schools. I think that
yes.
Something that the young man who talked about the East Winston Library, he talked about the protests that came up, and the fact that people felt their high schools had been eliminated, other things in the community had been eliminated, so they wanted to keep wanted to ensure that did not happen to the library. So I think, kind of relating it to part of what he talked about in his presentation would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he and I, we felt like we found real treasures when we went to the East Winston Library and we saw these newspaper articles that were quoting my colleague, now retired, Dr. Larry Little, and
Right.
then Joycelyn Johnson, and even our chancellor, our original chancellor, the Reverend Dr. Kenneth R. Williams. So he was instrumental in that as well. And I actually asked Mr. Flynn if we could possibly see if there's something in the WSSU archive related to Dr. Williams, Chancellor Williams' attempts to really protect beyond the campus, but really protect the Black community uh, uh, and the libraries, because he was really a big supporter of Black public libraries. So um, it might be interesting too for the community members if we can find at least a few images of schools and libraries, etc., just so people have a visual. So I think if we we keep the questions just nicely balanced to give a framework, but also open enough so that people can feel encouraged to share what they really want to share. And it might be that we spend more time making connections that day, and we're going to try to really get people inspired to sign up. So we'll have those sign up sheets that we've used at Juneteenth and some of our other events, some of the historic marker events. I know we've signed a few people up. So we'll make sure that we have those that day uh, for people who maybe don't want to speak to the whole group that day, but would like to share one-on-one with whoever will do the oral history collection. So, well, I will share this with Tom and Heather and Michelle, and even if we cannot have another planning meeting, we'll work on these things so we can maybe get some media posts as well as some effective marketing material.
And I
So
think it would be good if we came up with one or two things that we're specifically going to talk about that people might be interested in, because just looking at the flyer, that I'm looking at, and it just says part one, community conversation about the importance of the Black community in Forsyth County. Well, that's very broad, and people, you know, that doesn't necessarily, what does that mean to me, kind of thing, versus if we said we're going to talk about the impact of the predominantly Black high schools in Winston-Salem school system or whatever, so that people would say, oh, yeah, I want to talk about that, or what did it mean, because otherwise, or either we have to reach out to specific people to invite them and talk about it. And maybe, for instance, if we wanted to talk about the library, reach out to the friends of the library and let them come and talk about why it's important to maintain support for the East Winston Library, and then we could talk about what did it mean or that kind of thing. But I think if we leave it too broad, we again, unless we make a concentrated effort to reach out to specific groups or people. But if we get the announcement together about, or I can just share this information this that we have at I'll take it to a couple of meetings I have this weekend.
thanks, Miss Annette. I have to go back to our notes, but Miss Erica takes really great notes. Do you recall when we were planning all of this a few months ago, do you recall if we were more specific about this 23rd event, about the kind of questions or how we were going to kind of organize the day? I'm sorry, but I can't remember offhand if we were a little more specific. But I will check my notes later today and get back with everyone. Um, what are your thoughts, Miss Erica?
So I remember, and forgive me if you've said this already, because I remember talking about all the different, when we were sitting in the room and talking about all the different organizations and talking about the social groups that everybody belonged to and how they got started. And I remember we sort of fleshed that out as being maybe a continuing conversation, and maybe starting that on the 23rd. Does that sound vaguely familiar?
Yes,
I
that,
don't have my note. I don't have that notebook with me. But we talked about a whole lot of topics for the 23rd, but I don't think we ever decided on anything specific.
yeah,
Was
that helps me. That helps me uh, think back. And I do remember we talked about trying to reach out to the Alumni Association for Atkins High. Um, I think we talked about trying to connect with the Friends of the Library and a few other groups, but I can't recall right now what those other groups were. And I think we also, like you said, we weren't sure if we would get much done that day, but it would be a day to really try to initiate the conversations and inspire people to really connect with AAHI and down the line share their pictures and documents as well as their stories. Um, Dr. Christian, do you have any thoughts or suggestions?
I don't at the moment. Uh, the only thing that really just stands out to me, as you guys know, anytime we were talking about advertising, and of course we advertise through the city quite a bit, and the other key piece of that is really just, word of mouth. If we could really do a good job of just putting that information out there that way, then of course research still shows that 80 to 90% of all advertisement best practices is still word of mouth. So I think as long as we're doing those two things, we should be able to get the type of turnout that we want.
Thank you, Dr. Christian.
You're welcome, Chair.
One thing that I've been thinking about is availability to lead different groups of people through the exhibition, particularly on weekends when parking is easier to manage on campus. But I think if we all personally knew a few people, especially elders who would be interested, we might be able to take them when the library's open and just take them through the exhibition, and that might inspire them to then come on the 23rd. What do you think about that, Miss Annette?
that would be good. But I was focusing on the 23rd, and knowing that we're, today is what, the 6th, and we don't have a lot of time. I was thinking maybe we should identify a specific group and try to reach out to them and get a commitment from them to, for instance, since Erica's comments did kind of refresh my memory. We talked about, and I've mentioned this at the Atkins alumni meeting for the past 2 months in terms of the exhibit. I somewhere along the way I didn't focus in on the 23rd as much as I should have probably, but maybe since we could reach out to Atkins alumni or the Big Four Alumni Association, which encompasses the 4 high schools, and ask them, would they come and talk about the importance of the historically Black high schools in the community and the role they played? Reach out to some specific people to come and try to get some kind of commitment, and maybe encourage them to bring at least 3 or 4 people with them.
That's a great those are great suggestions.
I can reach out back out because I have been talking about this with the ACAS alumni, and I know they're in the process of reorganizing, and this might be a way to opportunity to draw even more of them into the group. But whatever we do, we're going to have to do it fast because I know if people are like me, I have this on my calendar, but I really can't add too much more.
Right. Well, when I went with a student over to the East Winston Library, connected with one of their younger librarians. She goes by the name of Rudy, wonderful young woman. And we did find out, and I don't know if anyone on the call knows about this, but I think in the early 80s, there was a series of very long, important interviews with both Dr. Malloy's and a number of our civil rights leaders. I think there were 16 Black elders who were interviewed, and each interview is about an hour long. And so I offered to have the students listen and catalog and transcribe. And so now the head of the library wants to connect with me. And so I could take the opportunity related to a discussion on these extremely important oral histories that have not been circulating. No one's been using them. And so we're hoping we could digitize them and transcribe them and catalog them, and maybe even then put them into AAHI's archive. But I could also use the discussion as an opportunity to ask the head of the library to advertise and bring people, and I could go over there and share some of our marketing materials. So the student and I were really impressed with the fact that this amazing collection exists, and right now it's sort of on a hard drive, and I don't know if there's been anybody that's had the time to really sit and listen, and so they're precious. And rather than the library necessarily keeping it there and everybody having to go there, I'm going to try to make the argument that if we work on this material and post it through AAHI, that it would be accessible to really almost anybody in the world that would want to look at this material. So I will work on that. And Miss Annette, did you know about that collection? Did you ever hear about it?
No, I didn't know about it until you mentioned it in a previous email.
So if you go over to the East Winston Library, there are photographs of all of these elders, including both Dr. Malloy's. And so everybody who has a picture is also one of the elders who gave an interview. I think, again, Mr. Flynn knew about them. I think they were done in the early 80s.
Oh, okay.
So I'll work on the library. And I mean, we may want to keep things just focused on 2 or 3 things, like Black high schools, Black libraries, and maybe one other thing, so we don't go all over the place, because I think the event's either 3 or 4 hours. I know Saturday's event was 1 to 4, and I have to check the time for the 23rd, but it might be the same thing.
It's the same.
Yeah, so we really only have 3 hours. But if we're there, we want people to come in and see the exhibition. And so we might be able to have an AAHI kind of, marketing table. And also, obviously, we'll need something set up so we can sign people up for the interviews down the line. I'll talk to Tom some more, because in the archive itself, there's a wonderful place where he has conducted lots of interviews. So there should be library staff that could be available to not only record the community discussions, but if there are some people who just really, really want to give their interview that day, then they could be interviewed in the back. But it would also mean that at least one of us would need to be available to ask the questions for that. So I'll reach out to Mr. Tom, like I said, and see what we can do for that day.
Speaking of interviews, have you guys thought about going on WXII and just talking about the event for the 23rd? That way, of course, you get a very captive audience. And of course, you'll be able to reach a number of people that we normally don't reach. So that's another idea.
That's a good idea. Would that be would the city contact?
Oh, we could definitely look into it and see if we can make that happen.
Miss Annette, you're great at giving interviews. I've been with you when you give like the redlining interviews. If we could arrange that and you had time, would you be willing to sort of be our spokesperson for that and just call out to the community for people to come?
I don't want to say no, but I don't want to commit. Because again, I don't have a good feel for how that day is going to flow. And that's what's bothering me. What exactly is gonna happen that day? What are we gonna talk about? And so if we get that a little bit more defined, then yes, I'd be willing to do that. But otherwise, I just want to know I know what our goal is, but it's like how are we trying to get there? Are we going to bring people there to just let them talk about anything they want to talk about, or are we going to direct the conversation? If it says community conversations about the importance of the Black community for Forsyth County, is that the major question we're going to ask, or are we going to focus on something else?
Well, I think we do need to connect it to the buildings and the builders, and so I think we have to make sure that we use that the lens of Black spaces.
Okay, so maybe if we could
Celebrating
formalize that a little bit so that we would let people know what it is we want them to come and talk about. Then I would be more comfortable. But without that, I would not want to just say, come join us. So, I need a little bit more structure in order for me to be comfortable with doing that.
So I think the exhibition itself gives us a really good framework, and we can sort of default to some of their language. The exhibition is about celebrating Black spaces, Black builders, Black architects. And so, and AAHI is really about overall Black heritage in our town. So, if we kind of build on that language, sort of combining our AAHI language with the We Built This language,
right?
All comes together. So it is about balancing it. If somebody showed up and wanted to talk about their civil rights advocacy, in the late 60s and early 70s, we could always shift it to what places did you do that at? So we talk about Black place and space while we're also celebrating all of the achievements of our elders. And part of it also is about that our reparative focus with AAHI. So many beautiful Black places and spaces were destroyed from gentrification, urban renewal, etc. And so I think we have to, at least, even if we don't put that in our media material, I think we have to allow for those kinds of conversations. So I think that really is it. We don't want to over specify what elders can speak about.
Right.
But we also want to kind of keep the focus of the intersection between the exhibition and our mission for AAHI.
Okay. There was something that the young guy
So
who
what
did
I
the
could, what
presentation
I,
on the, go ahead, I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you
There
off.
was a
Go ahead,
statement that the
listening.
young man had in his presentation that did the one on the two churches as to what they were trying to do. And I think that very much aligns with what we might be trying to do. So,
Right. Yeah, I actually had a conversation with John, was it yesterday? Yeah, in the oral history class about the way that his words about the richness and the complexity of the Goler Church's architecture was symbolic of that diversity and complexity within the broader Black community, but especially within the AME Zion congregation. And I thought that was an interesting kind of connection that he made.
mm-hmm.
And that could be something we could just ask a question like, how did African Americans use and appreciate their spaces? How were buildings symbolic of Black aspirations and challenges, etc.
Now I think you hit on something. If we direct the conversation in that kind of thing, what did it mean going, how, what role, why were you so proud to go to Athens, or why did you cherish coming to this church to worship, or something of that nature? Brings in the building aspect as well as.
And what's interesting is, well, Mr. Norwood, I don't know if any of you know Mr. Jimmy Norwood or Mr. Ronald Johnson. So Mr. Norwood is one of two licensed architects here in town. Mr. Ronald is a trained architect. He's a descendant of the Pitts family, so he has really deep roots in Winston-Salem. He works out of Charlotte now, but we asked the question on Friday about, what does it mean to be a Black architect? Is there a thing such as Black buildings and Black spaces? And there was a kind of range of, they had interesting views on all of that. And of course, those interviews were really precious. They had me in tears, Michelle and Heather. We were all really in awe. And Mr. Bronald actually talked about being the top of his class when he graduated from NC State's School of Architecture. And he went through, he suffered discrimination. As a freshman, he went to an important event commemorating the founder of the school. And that founder turned to Ronald and said, "Oh, you must be the token student." And I mean, that just had me crying, but yet he took that challenge then to be really inspired to graduate the top of his class. And he spoke about how he was really born to be an architect, that he had no idea that his grandfather was actually who was from Winston-Salem, was one of the first three students in North Carolina A&T's School of Architecture. And he didn't even know this till years and years later. But they shared their stories with such love and they were just, it was really wonderful. And we didn't only stick to architecture, right? So sort of the theme of architecture and spaces, that allowed us to start conversations, but we really allowed them to go wherever they wanted. And I think that's important when elders especially are sharing their memories and their thoughts, is to give them that space and freedom if they want to sort of go off the script. But maybe what we can do is come up, you and I and a few others can come up with a few appropriate questions to put on our media material. And so that would give people who come an idea, and they could start thinking ahead of time about what they want to say. And that's a best practice, in oral history collection. And we are committed, AAHI is committed to maintaining those best practices. I know our director, Ms. Wanda, has shared those best practices with staff in human relations and DEI. And I believe that those practices have been, perfectly in place whenever oral histories have been conducted by staff. So I think it would be appropriate to have at least a few of our initial questions out there. And hopefully then people would think about those questions and be ready to talk about them. So maybe we can work on that script together and get Tom involved and Michelle and Heather. But I think that's a great plan. So thank you, Miss Annette, for helping us kind of see where we need to go. Well, I said it was going to be a short meeting. This has been very productive. We actually have only about 7 minutes before 3. So again, I'll be back in contact with everyone with follow-ups to this conversation. I will also just say with the new Mapping Prejudice project, that's moving along. And I know Dr. Russell Smith, was hoping we could vote electronically if we couldn't have a quorum, but I needed to check back on the city's rules about that, because if we don't have a quorum here, I don't know if we can sort of do the make the motions to adopt so that we can sponsor Mapping Prejudice. So I'll need to work with Ms. Wanda and Dr. Ronnie about that. I don't know if we can resolve that now, but it would be wonderful so that we have a new anchor. So we had redlining as an anchor. We really supported the Rooted in Race, beautiful, beautiful project that I know Miss Erica played a big role in. And now we have the We Built This. And so I think the Mapping Prejudice is going to be a wonderful long-term project that we can connect to. So there are a number of other groups and offices within the city that are going to be supporting it, different groups in town. And I think it's a project where we can really make a difference in the community. So it's not only about heritage, but it is about that true reparative justice. So I'll work on that, and hopefully we'll figure out how we could vote, if there's a way we could vote, even if we're not meeting, or we can keep our fingers crossed and pray that we'll have a quorum next month so that we could vote on that. The last thing I'll share is just the open invitation to my oral history class that is directly aligned to AAHI. So there are 8 students there, and they would love to be able to conduct more interviews. So if you find out that there's somebody who wants to give an interview, let me know. But also, we would always welcome people to Zoom in with us if they can't come to campus, and we could do the interviews that way. So that's what I have to share. Are there any updates from the director? I know Ms. Wanda probably can't speak, but Dr. Christian, do you have any updates?
I don't have any updates.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Miss Erica, Miss Duncan, any staff updates? No.
No, not on my end.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for staying on the call. I actually see what a blessing it is to be in good company. I was really sick right before I zoomed in, and miraculously, my sinus infection is clearing up. So, um, I feel very blessed. But thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for sharing, and I'll make sure that I get back as soon as possible with everyone here in terms of how we're going to move forward for the 23rd. Any last thoughts or questions or comments?
No.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Take good care, and I promise to be back in touch soon.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Thank you.